Hello, everyone. Very warm welcome to our webinar session number 27. I'm just going to give it a few more minutes as we have other people who will be joining us. Perhaps you might like to just say hello in the chat and just tell us where in the world are you? And is the sun shining? Just hoping you can. Hi, Leanne's there from sunny Nottingham. Hi, Leanne. I'm here in England. Mark Reid is there from Coleraine, which is my hometown in Northern Ireland. Wonderful. I'm here in North Shields in the northeast of England, and it's very bright and sunny. Miranda, hello there, Brighton, Lancaster, but it's very cold. Limavady, hi. Leanne, great to see that you could join us. Fusan from Turkey, how wonderful that you're here, Fusan. Again, we have someone from snowy Iceland. Fantastic. Lisa from Lincoln. Just keep those messages coming. I won't be able to read out maybe all of them. Jenny from Tipperary, Sam from South Wales, Colleen from Omagh, Strabane. Great to see our colleagues from Northern Ireland joining us, and someone from Erin. Hi, Erin from Loch Lomond. Fantastic. Great. Beautiful sunny Derbyshire is where Helen is. Hello, Helen. Long time no see. Great. Look at those names and look at where everyone is. I'm going to just make a start, do a little introduction. And really just to say that you're in for such a treat today, in that this is webinar number 27. Webinar series started during lockdown, where I felt lonely and thought, I'll try and reach out to people and maybe we can support each other. And here we are a few years on, and we're 27 webinars into our experience. So today we're joined by Nick Chambers. Nick, do you want to say a quick hello and tell us where are you and what's the weather like where you are?
Yeah, I'm near Cambridge, and it's actually, it's a nice sunny day. So looking forward to our sessions. Great to see so many people from so many places.
Fantastic. And Aisling Murray-Fleming. I'm not doing formal introductions here because everyone will know, having signed up to the session.
Good afternoon. I am coming from a very rare but sunny Dublin, so we'll take that while it's going.
Yeah, fantastic. Oh, that's great. Well, wherever you are in the world, folks, you're very, very welcome. We've got the title of the event, What Do You Want to Be When You Grow Up? Are we asking children the wrong questions? So that's our theme for today. We are going to be looking very much at studies of early career-related learning in primary schools, with a spotlight on Ireland, North and South, a place that's very dear to my heart. And I've had the pleasure of working with Aisling and colleagues in Dublin, looking at the training of careers professionals. And in particular, Aisling is undertaking a PhD, and she's going to share with us some of her exciting learnings that are coming from that. So by the end of the webinar, you'll have delved into the findings of, if you like, two approaches, very complementary studies around exploring how early career learning can foster curiosity, broaden horizons, promote inclusivity for children from diverse backgrounds. So remember, the big question is, are we asking the right question, or indeed are we asking the wrong question? So I thought that perhaps what we could do for a little icebreaker would be to, first of all, tease you with this opportunity to read a report which actually was mentioned in Stormont in Belfast recently, which Nick's been very much involved in as a sponsor of Drawing the Future, exploring the aspirations of children in Northern Ireland. So let's get ourselves into icebreaker mode, and let's say rules of the game. There are no right, no wrong answers here. We can have a bit of fun as well. But if we're asking ourselves, are we maybe looking at the wrong answer, then what might be the right question to ask children in primary schools? Many people here are careers advisors, educators, researchers. Let's have a little brainstorm between us, use the chat, and let's see, what do we think might be the right question to ask children in primary schools? Just use the chat and whatever comes to mind. You might even want to share, when you were at primary school, did you have a career idea, something that you thought you might like to do? Who do you want to be? What are you good at? What jobs do you know about? Who's your role model? Now, you will get a copy of the transcript and the chat. So, you know, we use this as a learning opportunity. So don't worry if I haven't read out everyone. But it's, you know, who's your role model and why? What difference you want to make to the world? That's a fantastic question. Indeed, they all are. What jobs do you know about? What do you want to be when you grow up? What do you enjoy doing? Giving some examples. What skills do they need? Wow, what makes you happy? What do you care about? Don't you think as adults as well, it'd be quite nice if people sometimes, when they're interviewing or doing careers, what is it that you actually care about? Because that's where actually we get most excitement, isn't it? Fusan, what games do you play? Absolutely. And particularly in the context of digital advancements as well. But I guess, you know, games come in all sorts of sizes and methods. Well, I think that's a great list for us. Catherine saying, what makes you most excited? Aisling, what do you think around, you know, you've had a fair bit of experience talking to children.
I love all these questions. They're fantastic questions. And they're the questions that children ask of each other. They ask them things like, what do you like to play? What do you think you're good at? What do you like? So it's lovely to see that that adults recognize those questions as good conversation starters for children.
Fantastic. And Nick, what about you? Is there a right question to ask children in primary schools?
I suppose probably not about careers really. It's about, I suppose, you know, what's important to them. You know, what do they really care about? You know, what are their passions? I suppose.
Fantastic. So one of the things that we were going to do next was to show you a little video, and I'm going to keep that until the end because I'm a little bit worried we couldn't, had a few technical issues in our little rehearsal. But just to say that everyone will get a copy of the slides, which will include the videos. And if we're not successful in this session, you'll be able to actually listen to not just one video, but 2 videos. And I think it's a lovely way to introduce Nick Chambers, because Nick is one of these individuals who has a global presence as well as a very much a UK presence. He's been in this business of looking at career learning. Doesn't always call it career, but how children can actually be supported. We're thinking about, you know, how do you address that? You can't be what you don't see. But Nick will say more about himself and that. So I hope I'm giving you a big enough sort of intro. Nick, based in London. And Nick and I have worked very closely in Northern Ireland around Ballysally Primary School as a place, which is one of the areas that's in the most deprived part of Coleraine, the town that I grew up in, not far from where I actually lived. And Nick's been doing some fabulous work. And this is an image of the Minister of Education, who recently came to a launch of some of the work that Nick has been doing. So Nick, I think over to you. I'm going to drive the slides, so I'll be your assistant. Tell me when to move on, and I will do
Let me just checking. So you can see my slide. Are you going to do the slides for me?
I'll do the slides for you, unless you want to drive them yourself. But I've got, can you see here, what jobs do children in Northern Ireland aspire to? Who's influencing their choices? And how
And
do
I
they
can't see
compare
I can't see your
labour
I can't see
market?
your slide at all. I can't see anything. Just blank screen at the moment.
Oh dear.
So
How do we solve this? Would you
anyone
like me
else
to
can see?
stop
Can
sharing
anyone
and
see it? I see a blank screen. Yeah.
okay. I'll stop
Let me just try
sharing.
and share. Let me just try and share and see if
You
this.
try and share and we'll see
Yeah,
where
let's
we
see if
go
it
from
works.
there. In the chat, folks. Just
Right, can you see that?
yes.
Yeah,
Excellent.
right.
Well,
Okay, that's on. Right. Okay. So yeah, 15 years old, and ours is really trying to give children the chance to meet people from the world of work and see what they can do. I'm not going to go about all our research, but we've done about 70 reports over the years, but they're all around employer engagement and the whole thing around social mobility, broadening horizons. So if you want to take a screenshot, that really summarizes all the research we've done. A lot around exciting children, about what they learn, the reduction in NEETs, our sort of 4 or more report now, which is at the heart of a number of government's career strategies, helping young people to be better informed and to reduce the careers mismatch. And that picture actually was drawn by an 8-year-old in Sweden as part of our Drawing the Future, which I'm going to talk about. So lovely little drawing I used. All our research is available on the website. So everything I'm talking about today, you can actually find the original reports. If you just go to Education Employers. So if you want to look in more detail at any of the reports, you can do. We also have a sort of free big library, which has lots of reports you can do, search by keywords. And I know quite a lot of you will be signed up to our sort of monthly digest, which brings together research and events from all over the world. So everything on Education Employers, so it's quite easy to do. Right, so interest in primary school goes back quite a long way, probably about 2013 actually, but it was in 2015 with the National Head Teachers Association, which in the UK represent, or in England I should say, represent the majority of primary head teachers. We went out to really understand what it was that people from the world of work could do to help young people. And the results took us by surprise, I think, at the time. You know, the enthusiasm from heads, this idea that it could impact on their attainment, on children's attainment, the idea of role models help those kids from disadvantaged backgrounds, and understanding career choices, and particularly this idea of positively changing things, children's attitudes to school. And you'll see this coming through. So big report, and with the Northern Ireland one I'm going to start on in a minute is really following on from that. So we did a really simple exercise. We got children to draw pictures of what they wanted to be when they grew up, and also who influenced them and their attitudes to school. So we did it in 19 countries. Overall, we didn't do Northern Ireland at the time, but the findings were, again, quite stark, that gender stereotyping was evident in every country. And we'll see later on in this presentation a country that does well in gender, but where the career aspirations are still very biased based on gender. TV, family, radio, biggest influences. What you won't see there is social media. It's probably because in 2017 social media wasn't the thing it is today, and you'll see again how that's changed. Less than 1% of children getting to hear about jobs from people going to the classrooms. This disconnection between kids' aspirations and projected workforce, and the reason that is important is our research showing that the pattern of jobs of 7-year-olds is similar to 17-year-olds. And then in some parts, in some more developing countries, you know, the aspirations of children often for more professional jobs than in certain parts of England, which I think was very surprising to many people. So top job in the UK was teacher for girls, and boys was sports person. Not surprisingly, the role models that kids see every day are teachers. The majority of primary school teachers are female, so perhaps not surprising. So very scientific on here. How did you hear about it? Well, mostly from sort of family. How many came in from schools? Well, 1%. Australia, very similar pattern, surprisingly. Teacher, top, police, there, hairdresser, vet, artist. So even on the other side of the world, very similar results. Bangladesh, we talked about there. You'll see there suddenly the top job for girls is a doctor, followed by a scientist at number 3. Boys' top is scientist. Sorry, second is scientist, engineer, doctor. If you take some of our more deprived coastal towns in England, you'll see a very different pattern than you will in Bangladesh. New Zealand, they then repeated the sample for the whole country based on the methodology. And the main thing here is look at the influence at the top in red on family members, very strong, famous people. How did you hear about it? 0.5%, people coming in, 0.5%. And that was their impetus to get people to go into primary schools in New Zealand. They then also looked at the correlation between where the children had put their job choices and where the jobs predicted labour market was, and they did it in a series of circles, size of circle, which was really a very clever way of showing this big disconnect, this mismatch. I think we got someone on the call, Deirdre Mel to correct me, I think we got someone on the call from Sweden. Today we did a report from Sweden where we asked kids the same question. Now, as many of you know, Sweden, like Iceland, is very, very high up in the gender equality, and therefore I was going to see if on the chat, I don't know if I can see the chat facility while sharing the screen, if you could actually, I'm going to stop sharing a second, if people could actually have a guess at what top job girls chose in Sweden. So given the fact that it's nearly number 1 in the world for gender equality, I wonder if people have a guess of what job you thought that engineer, lawyer, scientist, doctor, engineer. Yeah, well, that's indeed what I would have thought. Let's see if I can go back to sharing. Here we go. The result was hairdresser. Okay. I'm not saying I'm much in need of myself, but yeah, hairdresser followed by teacher, and then boys football YouTuber. So really, I think they were very surprised by that finding indeed. We did a similar thing in Sweden, looking at jobs. So professional athletes on the far left. These were the choices of children in green, and then the number of jobs in either nationally or in the region in orange and red. Basically, virtually no jobs and lots of children. So it's very stark that when you look at the green is what children want, and the sort of orange and sort of yellowy orange and red are the jobs. So a very stark result there. On to Northern Ireland, done by Deirdre, Hughes, Chris, Percy and myself. I started about 1.5 years ago. Really enjoyed doing this project. Similar sort of methodology again. We're going to see, I don't think this clip is working for the sound, but we'll come back to that. There's a little clip. I'll come back to that and see if we can share it in a minute. I don't want to delay things. Right. I mean, for me, the drawings of children are just amazing. There's one wants to be a panda hugger. But a sample size about 1,400, nearly 1,500, and a sort of mixed, there's probably about equal split in terms of boys and girls. In terms of language, the favourite subject, PE, number 1. Maths actually comes up globally very high, actually. Again, much to people's surprise, but maths and art are generally fairly high. PE, I think that was a bit of a surprise to us. And then dropping down a little bit. And then you'll see this picture, I want to be a builder, and at the bottom, I don't know if you see on your screen, says, who were they? My granddad. So we're beginning to look at parental influences. Encouragingly, that a lot of the children thought the boys and girls could do the same job, which is very encouraging. So that's line 2, girls and can do the same job. That's going up. So I think there's belief in girls and boys being able to do the same job. However, as we'll see in a minute, when they come to describe it, they actually sort of revert to stereotypes of what they think they could do. bit of a difference, not a huge difference in going to university, and lots of jobs. Again, all of these are in the full report. I'm not going to go in massive detail. We had an amazing range of jobs on all of these. Oddly, this time we didn't have any politicians. Normally we have some politicians, but on this case, maybe because Stormont wasn't sitting for a couple of years, they weren't maybe used to seeing politicians. I make no comment on that, but it was the only country where politicians weren't aspired to. Hopefully that will change.
Nick,
yeah.
I'll just come in on that because I've spoken to a few politicians in Northern Ireland,
Right.
but also elsewhere, and they said that when they were at primary school, they didn't aspire to be a politician. So they sort of queried whether there were many children in all of the studies that there have been who do want to be politicians. So it got me thinking, you know.
Yeah, no, it's actually fun. The certainly the Ugandan one, they wanted to be president. Quite a few wanted to be prime minister. In the UK, I think in England we had about 6 people wanted to be the prime minister. So yeah, more sort of leaders necessarily than politicians. But we normally do get a few anyway. You know, but you'll see there is the range of people and the range of sort of jobs. You know, cartoon animator to, you know, people want to be a priest, perhaps not too surprising given the context, to a scientist to do with cats, to, you know, the standard zookeeper, firefighter. But, you know, it's a really quite interesting sort of thoughts there, much wider range than you might imagine. So coming on to the key findings of the report, you know, we talked about for this significant mismatch between career aspirations and young people. And the only reason I think that's important is because, as we'll see later on, the career aspirations of 7-year-olds often tend to stick. So if their horizons aren't broad to start with, they can start narrowing. And then actually when they get to 16, 17, when they are beginning to choose, it gets much harder to choose. Very few aspire to where they're a lot about key growth, not just in Northern Ireland, but many countries are talking about technology, robotics, science, cyber. Very few people wanting careers in that or knowing about careers in that sector. TV, parents' biggest influence, but also now social media. You'll see this on the YouTuber, but still 1%, only 1% of people getting to meet visitors coming into their school. There's a sort of mismatch, really. Culture media, 1% of jobs, 35% of children putting as their first preference. So you can begin to see this sort of very significant mismatch. These codes are the standard sort of SOC codes. So sometimes they're a bit hard to translate, but what we've tried to do is take all the jobs and put them into the relevant SOC codes. But the way they're grouped can seem a little bit odd, but that's just because of the way they're constructed. How do you hear about your job? Again, you know, we've got that before: teacher, a little bit hobby, enthusiast, internet coming up high. Nice one here, nice picture here of a girl who wants to be either a teacher or a farmer. And I think on one it says, you know, her mum and dad, one is a teacher, one is a teacher and one is a farmer. So wants to aspire to both of those two jobs. But you'll see the graph there where we plotted the first preference and projected jobs. So not dissimilar to what we've seen in Sweden, not dissimilar to the round depictions in New Zealand. We also looked at a bit more detail about sort of first and second choice to see if there are certain patterns, and sometimes there are. So, you know, there's a sort of theme to it. Sometimes it's completely random, but there are quite a lot where they've got a theme. They like being outdoors, they like working with people, and that follows through where they've given a second or third choice. Social economic difference makes a big difference. We've seen there, again, not particularly different in Northern Ireland and other countries, but where you grow up does make a difference to what you aspire to, and your local area. I mean, I did some work looking at where lawyers in Northern Ireland are based, and I think nearly without exception, they're either headquartered or work out of Belfast, or say they do. So if you're in a rural part of Northern Ireland, you're much less likely to bump into a lawyer than if you're in the middle of Belfast. And so, not surprisingly, your aspirations are partly based on what you see. And we've talked about the gender. So the fields those are the figures for Northern Ireland. Farmer higher up than we'd expect, but it's bits of it are very rural. Engineer encouragingly high. No scientist in that list, you'll see. Technology, and then girls very much so, teacher, vet, hairdresser, artist. Football encouraging is up there for girls. YouTuber, chef. And I just look at those lovely. We've got all these pictures, aren't they? I mean, they're just utterly glorious. I think these pictures. Look at the sort of maths is fun. There you go. I mean, what amazing. Someone who can do maths and is also brilliantly artistic as well. Looked at expectations of going to university. People say, why do you ask that question? Well, actually, quite a lot of children at an early age have either got views on it or ruled it out, so we thought we'd ask that. Actually, most people had an opinion. Higher for girls and boys. Again, perhaps not. Things. And then we've got these things about uniform jobs like either police, firefighters, and again, you see that gender stereotyping quite strong in there. Not much moving between 7 and 11. Going towards the end of our findings here, but we think that schools, given they can't change the parents or the social media or virtually anything else children do, what they can do is they can change the people that children get to meet in their classrooms and can invite people in. I'm going to pause for a second there, I think. Deirdre, back to you for a second.
Thank you, Nick. It's great. Just to say, folks, when you get the slides, Nick has got a lot of slides that he could share with you, and he's got some great videos. So, as I said earlier, if we don't get to play them in this session, you will actually get them, and you'll be able to listen to the joy of these children.
Shall we see if can we get the video to work? We're going to get.
Yeah, if you've got it at your end there.
Have you managed to get it? Actually, have you managed to get it working?
I haven't, I'm afraid, Nick. The sound isn't working for me either.
Nick, just while we sort of engage with our audience around their questions, and now is the time if you like to ask a question or just pop it into the chat. But there was a great question here earlier from Janina, possibly from Iceland. Tell me if I'm right or wrong, but I think Janina's from Iceland. And did you know, Janina, that I had an ancestry sort of DNA, and I am part Icelandic, which I always thought I was when I went to Iceland, so I was delighted. Anyway, I digress. Right, Janina has asked, are the aspirations of children correlated with values? Are they asked about their values? Nick, tell us a little bit about that. Is that something that you've explored, or is that a next step, or?
Yeah, we have not in the Drawing the Future ones, because this is quite hard to sort of do that. But we have done some of the work mainly in Switzerland, where we've been looking at what matters to children in terms of is it health, is it equality, is it the climate? And so we've done a bit of work around not so much on values, but more areas that matter to them, really. We haven't really done a correlation yet between that and the jobs they're choosing. But certainly in some of the narrative of what people have written, a lot have put down people who want to work in medicine because they've been affected by family or friends who've been affected. So, we've had quite a lot of people who've written, in some cases, very, very technical stuff, for certainly an 8-year-old, want to be a cardiovascular surgeon, because of someone in the family had a heart attack, and so they'd obviously done a lot of research on it. So you do get some where they've spent some time, particularly those interested in things like the climate or green, where they've been watching a program and they've got really interested in it, and therefore they've done decided to do a job because they want to save animals or save the planet or make things better. We haven't sort of looked at sort of sort of values. It depends how you define values, but we haven't done a straight sort
Yeah.
of value.
Well, it's food for thought, isn't it?
Yeah,
Around the
yeah,
purpose of
lot of thinking.
these.
Yeah.
Yeah, purpose of these sessions is to sort of think about research and practice. And can I just say that my 7-year-old granddaughter, in terms of her values, what she wants is that she thinks that her granny needs more modern clothes. So she'd like to be a fashion designer, which I actually was quite taken aback by. She said, I don't think they have clothes for older women as much as they do for young. So I didn't know whether to take it as a compliment or an insult. But anyway, let's go back to Sarfraz has just and again, Sarfraz from Leicestershire College. Correct me if I'm wrong, but how is this research, Nick, influence in practice? And I'm going to come on to Aisling, but keep those questions coming. How is this research influence in practice? Give us an example, Nick.
How are we doing for time? I could show a couple more slides.
Well, we're maybe okay.
Or should we come back to that question?
Yeah, after
Aisling. Yeah, let's do yours, and let's then come back, because I would like to answer that question, but I don't want to.
Great. We've got some great questions in here. So Aisling, I think I really just want to say the work you're doing on your PhD, fantastic. To be able to look at the north of Ireland and the south of Ireland and to actually share together the learning is just wonderful. So Aisling, over to you to tell our audience who you are, what you're up to, what you're finding.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Deirdre, and thank you, Nick. That should be sharing okay now. Great.
Yeah.
So first off, I want to say I happened to be in attendance at the launch of that report in Ballysally, and I know that Nick has a video to show you as well, but it was the most amazing afternoon with watching the children interact with local business people, with their communities, their teachers, their parents, and it was just, the atmosphere was electric and everybody was learning, adults and children alike. And it really reinvigorated me around my own research and my own ongoing work. So it was an absolute pleasure to be part of that. And I really encourage you to engage with the video if you get a chance, because I doubt it'll even do it justice, but the atmosphere was just absolutely amazing. So thank you very much, Deirdre, for inviting me to be here today. I'm delighted to share my relatively small scale study that I've been carrying out in the Republic of Ireland. But before I kind of dive into that, let me talk to you just a little bit about my own background, because I currently work in Dublin City University, and as Deirdre mentioned, I'm a lecturer there and we work on training guidance counsellors. But my background is actually business. So for a long time, I worked in HR and recruitment. And after a number of years of doing that, I realised that a lot of the work that I loved was having conversations with people about their career journeys. And oftentimes they were people who weren't particularly happy in their careers. And more often than not, when you really had a deep conversation with somebody, it would go back to childhood, and it would certainly go back to earlier than late teens, about when they started to decide that they wanted to do a particular career or follow a particular career path or form of study. And I think that really is what piqued my interest in the first place in the whole kind of guidance area, if you like. I went back in 2013 and did a part-time master's in guidance counselling in Dublin City University. And through my 2 years of study and the placement hours that I would have completed then, and my subsequent years as a careers professional working in schools and even in a prison at one point and in a couple of non-profit organisations, again, I realised that people made decisions much earlier in life than we were ever really talking to them as guidance counsellors in an Irish setting anyway. I eventually went on to become a part-time lecturer and then a full-time lecturer, and I've been sharing the programme in Dublin City University for a number of years. And I'm in year 4 of what I hope will be a 5-year part-time PhD. And there was no question for me about what that would focus on, but early career related learning was really where my passion lay, if you like. So I really wanted this study to do 2 things. One, I wanted to focus on the very early career related learning in an Irish context. So I wanted to work with primary school children as they were beginning their primary school journey. And there was 2 reasons for that. One was because my own experience as a mum of 3 girls was that the room for conversation and those kind of organic conversations around career seemed to dissipate, in my opinion, as children moved through primary school. And the number of reasons anecdotally I could attribute to that were maybe the introduction of things like standardized testing from 9 years onwards, and maybe that the curriculum just gets a little bit busier as they move through primary school. In the early years of primary school in Ireland, we have a curriculum called Ashtar. Ashtar is the Irish word or the Gaelic word for journey. And there's a lot of role play and encouragement to, I suppose, be curious, to problem solve. And it's a great opportunity for role play, and often role play careers come into it. So I would hear my children talking about jobs in the early ages, and then they would kind of dissipate as they went through primary school. And the second reason I suppose I wanted to focus on the early years was because I really wanted the children's voice to be front and center of this. And I wanted to see how much children knew at an early stage, or how much we underestimated that they knew at an early age. So in terms of what the study looked like, I think in order to be able to place the study, I just want to give you a quick overview of guidance in the Republic of Ireland to give a context, I guess. And apologies for those of you who might be already very familiar with this. But we are very privileged in Ireland insofar as that the 1998 Education Act set out that guidance was now an entitlement for all second level students. So every secondary school in Ireland has a guidance counsellor, and every secondary school student will have an opportunity at some point in their school journey to interact with guidance counselling. Now, what that looks like and how that guidance is delivered can vary from school to school, depending on things like resources and school management and those kind of ideas. But there's been a huge amount of work done by what was the National Centre for Guidance and Education, and is now a guidance unit within our Department of Education, around developing resources, guidelines and different tools for guidance practitioners in schools, including what we call the whole school guidance framework. And that's a whole school approach to guidance, whereby it's not just the responsibility of the guidance counsellor, but subject teachers and school management, and everybody has a role to play in guidance. So in second level, we're doing a lot of things really, really well. But generally, the findings internationally, and they seem to correlate with my own research, are showing us that that is too little, perhaps too late, and that we need to kind of explore and maybe widen out the reach. And guidance counsellors in Ireland will tell you that the biggest challenge that they have in a secondary school setting currently is that their role is somewhat dual. So if you look at the 2007 definition that was adopted by guidance practitioners in Ireland, we talk about facilitating people through their lives to manage their own educational, training and occupational choice, and also personal, social and life. So that dual role, we take a very holistic approach to guidance in Ireland. And as a result of that, guidance counsellors in Ireland are sometimes left holding the space for young people that are having different issues, particularly mental health issues. And that seems to have kind of grown exponentially post-COVID. And our mental health services mightn't necessarily be meeting that need. And so the guidance counsellor can often be left holding that space until the necessary referrals can be made. As a result of that, then there's less time, obviously, for the kind of educational and vocational pieces. And so that's a challenge for guidance counsellors that we're very aware of, and again, one that the Department of Education are trying to work on at the moment. In the background also, in 2023, the Irish government launched for the first time ever a strategic framework for guidance. And what was particularly pleasing about that, for me anyway, as a practitioner, is it referred to lifelong guidance. And the language has changed in the programme for government now, and lifelong guidance has become the term that is used. And for me, that's fantastic for a number of reasons. Number one is I believe very strongly in lifelong guidance. I believe in guidance all the way through the lifespan. But also it's acknowledging that it isn't just the Department of Education, which is where guidance currently sits, but that there's a cross-departmental need for interactions with guidance. And the principal aim of that strategy is for Ireland to have a more unified guidance system, which will allow people to have access to high quality, holistic and appropriate guidance, no matter what stage of life they are at. So maybe a lofty ambition, but there is an action plan that goes hand in hand with the strategy. And action or objective 2.5 is for primary school guidance to be looked at as a medium to long-term goal for the government. So I was certainly very pleased to see that. And I'm hoping that my research will somewhat inform how that might move forward. So in order to really look at what early career related learning was, I needed, of course, as a good academic, a definition. And I was really delighted to find this definition, which Nick and Deirdre would be more than familiar with as they were involved in the publication. But we're talking now about all kind of activities that occur in childhood in primary schools that are designed to give children from an early age a wide range of experiences of and exposure to education, transitions, and the world of work. And for me, that was really fantastic, because if we're looking at a whole school approach in secondary schools, we're hoping that a whole school approach will be taken in primary schools. So what I'm probably looking at in the long term for Ireland would be an approach that means guidance is weaved into existing curriculum subjects and becomes part of the learning as opposed to a standalone subject. In order to be able to do this, and in order to be able to understand what early career-related learning, if any, is happening in primary schools, for me, it was really important that children were the only voice, or the most important voice that was heard. And the Lundy model fits this idea really well. So Laura Lundy is based in Queens, and in 2007, she developed this model whereby children are the centre. You're giving children the space in the research to let their voices be heard, and then you're presenting their voices to an audience so that they can influence decisions around what happens next. And so this really fits perfectly for me, because my intention was to speak to children and take their views and present it to their parents and their educators, and that this would all be used to influence how guidance in primary schools might look in Ireland going forward. So how did that look, or what does that mean? I decided to, for this, the point of this study, it was going to be quite small, we knew that. So we used the Greater Dublin area, and we visited 3 primary schools. 100 children took part in the survey. There was 50 boys and 50 girls. They were aged between 5 and 9 years. So they were either in senior infants, year 2, or second class, year 4 of primary school. And the 3 schools, even though they were all situated in the Greater Dublin area, were from 3 very different areas, if you like. So one was very much an urban school, one was what we'd call a suburban school, and the third one was actually classified as a rural school. And when I went into each of those schools and visited the classes in those schools, I asked them to draw some pictures. And while they were drawing the pictures, we had a classroom conversation, which was recorded and subsequently transcribed, and has probably given some of the richest data, although I have to say the pictures have been absolutely fantastic as well. So the first picture we asked them to do was, we asked them, could they draw things that they liked to do? And with the idea of that being that what they like to do indicates their interests. Then I asked them, could they draw a picture of something they were good at, to try and understand if they understood skills and what skills meant. And the third picture we asked them to draw was to draw themselves when they were older at work. And again, I wanted to see if there was any correlation between their skills and their interests and their preferred career options. And what did the results look like? So we're still in the process of analysing the first 100, but I think the general trends in the interests and skills, no surprise here, and I know Nick certainly won't find it surprising, that gender is still really, really strong. So in the classroom conversations, the children, boys, girls, they all said, oh, girls can do anything they want. They can play any sport they want. They can have any job they want. It doesn't matter if you're a boy or a girl, and it wouldn't be fair if it was any different. However, their actual drawings and answers showed that there is still very strong gender influences in both activities, interests, and actually in careers. So you'll see, no shock, that football is still really high. Gaming, again, very high for boys, with no girls indicating an interest in either of those in terms of their preferred interests or activities. Girls were very strongly looking at art and creative play. By creative play, we included things like Lego, Play-Doh, and role play. And gymnastics still featured. There were some activities like running and swimming where there was a balanced gender interest. And then there was some overlap between the interests and the skills. So those children indicated that they're interested in football, and then also saying they felt skilled at football, and similarly for art, gymnastics, and reading. And again, gaming and football, very strong for boys in both categories, where dancing and music were more prominent among the girls in both interests and skills. In terms of career choices, again, very gendered. Football aspirations was exclusively male, with 22 boys saying that they wanted to be a professional footballer. Girls were aspiring to be artists, with 10 girls, and 4 girls looking to be scientists, and again, no boys for either of those. There were some gender balance among careers like doctor, law enforcement, and professional sports person. So that's a sports person outside of a footballer. And there was some link between interests and career aspirations. So those who liked art wanted to be artists, those who were good at football, often aspiring to be footballers, and the gaming interest translating to computer and gaming related aspirations around career. Another really strong point for us was only 2 children out of 100 were unsure about their future career, or indicate that they didn't know. So that would tell us that most children do have a specific career aspiration as young as the age of 5. So with all of these kind of gendered career choices and gendered interests coming forward, I was really keen to go forward to the next stage of the research, which is currently underway. And that will be us taking the key takeaways that traditional gender roles are still playing a role in activity preference and career aspirations, that artistic and creative fields are still more popular among girls, while sporting and gaming more among boys. And that while there are some fields like medicine and law enforcement and professional sports showing a bit of gender balance, that we probably need to do more work on that than we realise, because in conversation, children are telling you, no, I can do anything, I know I can do anything, but it's not translating into what they're actually writing down or drawing for us when it comes to it. The plan is now to take that data and bring it forward into phase 2, and we're going to present that data. So giving children that voice, that space, that audience, which will hopefully create an influence by presenting this information to their parents and guardians and their teachers and educators. So I'm currently in the process of designing surveys that will go out to them by the end of this month, and the end of March rather, and that data collection will take place over the month of April, with a view to beginning to, I suppose, correlate and analyse all of that data over the summer months. And we did an initial pilot with some teachers and some parents around the data that we found in order to kind of refine the design of these surveys. And what was interesting was a lot of them, particularly the teachers, saw opportunities for training and CPD to allow them to incorporate careers more into the everyday curriculum. There was definitely an appetite among both teachers and parents to strengthen early career-related learning through primary school education and curriculum. And there was an appetite for more integrated partnership between schools and potential industry partners or business partners. So I think there is an appetite there from the initial indications to do more, and I suppose to involve our conversations more around careers and aspirations. So optimistic from that side of things in terms of how things are going to go in Ireland, but very much still a work in progress. So I'd be really happy to take any questions if there are any.
Thank you very much, Aisling. I'm actually looking, I think there's at least seven questions in the chat or the Q&A, which I think maybe between you and Nick would be good to maybe just go through. The first one is from Nick Hamilton, and it sort of links into that point that you've just made, Aisling, about parents. Nick is saying, did any of the research ask the parents about their understanding of careers or expectations for their future? Is that something you've got in mind, Aisling, for your research?
So certainly phase 2, we're reaching out to parents to show them, first of all, what their children think. And actually the last question in that is, what did they think and what influenced their careers, or what they feel influenced their careers? And then I had to ask, because this comes up again and again, so I've actually added a question to say, can you remember what you wanted to be when you were younger and what influenced that? So that I'm really looking forward to that data.
Great. Nick, what about you in terms of research and connecting with parents? I'll say a few words after you've spoken about my experience of working with parents as part of the career-related learning in primary schools and all the projects and things that we've worked on.
Yeah, I know with some of the projects you and I have worked on in Derby, you've done more of that. I mean, the parents, such a key influence on children's aspirations, and it's an area where I think a lot more is needed to be done. And if we get the Ballet Sally video, you'll see some of the parents are actually there coming to the event. We haven't systematically sat down and done a survey of parents, but I think it's something we are very interested in, and it's a really important area to consider.
Great. Let me share a very practical tip, which we learned. Nick mentioned Derby, which is a city in the East Midlands of England. Actually, we were involved in a study, not just in Derby, but it was so successful that it was rolled out across the two counties, Derbyshire and Nottinghamshire. And part of the work that we did there was we held webinars for parents of primary school children, really just to see what sort of conversations, if any, they were having with their children. So I think that's a practical tip around. It was quite easy to organise. Of course, you get the parents there that maybe, they're the typical parents that it's the others that don't show up that you do want to reach. But one of the best ideas that we had came from a child who said, if you make a little sticker and I can take it home I can talk to my mummy and daddy about what I've learned today. And so what we did, we created stickers. It were very, very little badges so that when they went home, there could be a conversation. Their parent would say, what did you get that for? And that triggered a conversation. So I'm a very practical person. I'm an academic and I love theory and I love research, but I love the idea that that simple thing came from a child. So you might want to try it if you're working.
Yeah, and Little Ripples in Australia, Deirdre, you've done something very similar. I don't know if you're familiar, but Little Ripples is a project in Australia, and they've created these little cards, conversation cards. So it's a printable PDF, Little Ripples Australia, which is also, by the way, a winery I discovered recently. So make sure you go onto the website if you're looking for resources. But
Yeah.
They do.
Great.
It's a printable, a free PDF. It's printable, and it gives little prompts for conversation. So they encourage teachers to print them, put them on card, and give the children a different conversation card to bring home maybe once a week to try and start the conversations. So yeah, another
Fantastic.
kind of easy and practical idea, I guess.
Well, what we can do from education employers, those little badges, we have got, again, a template for them. So we could send those to you. You might want to use those as well.
Brilliant.
Great. Now, time is ticking on and there's so much to discuss. So that's the parents. Sarfaraz did ask, how is this research influencing practice? So, Nick, how these wonderful pieces of work you're doing in Ireland, because this is all about Ireland, but elsewhere, how is it influencing practice? Can you give us a few examples?
Yeah, I won't cite any. I've just been reading through all the sort of questions. So many great questions coming through, trying to answer all those. I think for us, the research is only half our work. Our other is actually the sort of delivery side, and really trying to make help teachers and people in schools to be able to find really easily role models who they can invite to their schools to show children the range of jobs. So we invented a sort of matchmaking platform called Inspiring the Future in primary. It's called Primary Futures. It's a very simple thing, but it does something very effective. So a bit like online shopping, I suppose, for teachers or career practitioners. You go on and you think, well, I'm looking for someone who has some background in science or languages or something else, and you Google and you see all the people near where you live, but also virtually now as well. And then you look at their profile and you think, oh, that person would be ideal for an event we're doing. And you send them a message through the system and you connect. And I mean, certainly in England now, it's about nearly approaching 5 million interactions now as a result of the sort of technology. So the technology is scalable. We're doing some stuff in Northern Ireland at the moment, mainly virtual. We're doing some stuff in Iceland, actually. I know someone from Iceland and various other countries. So it's a really simple way of giving schools access to a massive database of people. And that's sort of our aim, is to support schools, I suppose just to show children what's possible, really, and the breadth of subjects. And for me, it's probably less about careers than it is around exciting kids about their learning and getting them excited about school and the love of learning and that motivation of seeing the world and thinking, yeah, actually, I might like that. I mean, some questions in the chat about how do, 7-year-olds' career aspirations, how do they translate into 18? And of course it changes, and it would be wrong if they didn't. But some things certainly do stick, I mean, in terms of choosing at 7 or 8, you often get similar sort of patterns at 17, 18. Certain things drop off maybe when they realise, for teachers is very popular to start with as they get older, maybe less so, maybe because they get teenagers, maybe they see how much teachers earn and want to earn more money, or how hard teachers have to work, or maybe the reality of how tough teaching can be. I don't know, but yeah.
Yeah, and in relation to that, Nick, I see Erin is asking she's working with adolescents and wondering if there's if this higher proportion who don't know what their roots might be, and what happens between primary and secondary school that might knock some of these ideas. So she's asking, is it simply realism or something else? It's a brilliant question, Erin, because as I say, I'm working with the earlier years, and one of the reasons why I chose the 2-year groups within primary schools was I wanted to see if there was a difference between, we start standardized testing in Ireland age 9, So one group of children I've met had just completed standardized testing. So there's about maybe 30% of the children had done some form of standardized testing, and already there was a drop off from maths and reading in terms of things that they like to do, because you're beginning to do these activities now for the purposes of testing as opposed to the purpose of having fun or learning like you do in the early years. So there's a lot of research has been carried out in the US around academic tenacity, and about this idea that I'm not good at creeps in to our kind of thinking and our mindset, and that we rule out whole loads of careers because we associate them to be sciencey careers, and I'm no good at science, or maths careers and I'm no good at maths. So I definitely think there's a whole lot more research that could be done on that area, but a really great question.
Yeah, could I just, like in a way, I've been researching this topic for a number of years. That's really why I brought Aisling and Nick in as well. But based on my experience, really just what I do want to say is that for that kind of research informing practice, I was in Stormont last week. We had the deputy secretaries from 2 government departments. We had the minister for the economy there. And actually, how is this informing practice? Well, actually, at a policy level, the policymakers need to know that actually there is a sound evidence base on this. So we have colleagues from all over the world here, some from Pakistan, some from Slovenia, some from New Zealand, Turkey, Malta, Sweden. I'm very mindful, Stefan's mentioned that if we use acronyms, we must make sure that we spell those out for our overseas colleagues. But the way in which we can use this is to build up an international evidence base, as Nick is doing, and now a national evidence base, which Aisling is doing. And in Northern Ireland, that we can persuade policymakers that actually investing in this early on in education is really, really important. So I just wanted to bring that in around how's it influencing practice. And I will get you the link to all those resources. I'll put it in the chat before we finish, of where you can get those resources, including lesson plans. You might want to have a little look and see what sort of lesson plans have been developed, much of which has come from Nick's charities work. So let's go to our next question, and that is, have we seen a shift in healthcare interests in children, Nick, since COVID? Catherine Jennick's asking us that question. Are you seeing across the world, sort of careers that children want to work in these helping professions in healthcare? Is there any sign of that, Nick?
I'm not sure the sample size data is big enough to be able to show that, actually. I think you need to have a much bigger sample size. What we have seen, however, is we've seen quite a lot of drawings. In fact, there's one actually in the Northern Ireland report. I think I can't remember which page it's on, if linked to the Northern Ireland report, which is a lovely one about the NHS. It's got the NHS, National Health Service, those out of England logo, and the sort of rainbow colours that were used. So there were a few of those people drawing those images, but obviously we didn't have the pre-COVID, so it was very hard to tell. I mean, I think what you'd need is a really long-term, large longitudinal sample, and of course you need large amounts of funding for that. So I don't know the answer to that. I'd imagine we're seeing quite a lot of people in the health service, but I don't know what it was pre-COVID, so it's hard to know whether that is. But I have seen drawings where people have been using the rainbow colours that were very evident during COVID.
Yeah, no, that sounds great, Nick. Thank you. Aisling, can I go back to you, because Erin has asked a question. She's basically said that she's doing similar research with adolescents, and she has a much higher proportion who don't know what their roots might be. Do you have any idea what might happen between primary and secondary? And Nick, maybe you also have a view on this, that knocks these ideas. Is it simply?
I think it's the same thing again. I think it's the curriculum gets tougher, the testing gets stronger, and we begin to probably put too much of an emphasis on academic ability as educators. Certainly in Ireland, that seems to be the way it is. And we put quite a lot of weighting on standardized tests and on children's ability to meet certain targets. So I think that could be part of it. I think the second piece as well is that we probably lose, in Ireland anyway, And we lose the space in the curriculum, and I think I've mentioned that, for these organic conversations and for the kind of exploration piece, if you like, about different careers. It becomes very heavily what's in the textbook, and we need to get through the textbook and finish the curriculum. So I think we could definitely do work on that, because then by the time in secondary school in Ireland, again, the guidance counsellor comes up and picks up that baton, there's been a number of years lost, and decisions have been made even down to subject choice for second level subjects. They're made in Ireland before children go into secondary school. So they've already ruled out careers, possibly by not choosing a science subject or by choosing one language over another, or whatever way they made those decisions. So I do believe that we'll see less of that if we do more work in primary school around exploration of careers and conversations.
I mean, there's certainly a lot of work done by people like Professor Louise Archer and the Aspires program out of King's College London, and the Aspires program, very large, very big data set done over many years, looking particularly on science and girls sort of losing interest at that 10 and 11-year-olds, and then finding it very hard to get them interested at a later date. So, if you haven't seen any of the Aspires research by King's College London, definitely worth having a look at. It's really good stuff.
I'm just putting a link into that. I'm conscious for our colleagues from overseas.
It's UCL. I've got the university. You see there, she's quite accredited. That's UCL. Now, they used to be at King's and moved. Yes, now it's at UCL. Yeah. Very good point.
Great.
Yeah, there you go.
Stefan is saying how to present to children jobs that are not so visible for them. These jobs are perhaps too abstract for them. In your survey, Nick, children were talking about mainly those jobs that are sort of visible ones. Like, I guess it's like, how do you make the more invisible jobs become more elevated within schools, so that children, any sort of thoughts on that one? That's
a difficult question. I mean, I think there are, and the same with adults, really. You know friends, you think, I don't really know quite what their job is. They tell me, but I've gotten, given the job title, it's so confusing. I've not got a clue actually what they're doing in their job. So for children, it must be utterly bewildering, actually. And, whereas you can see a police person or a nurse and think, actually, you've got a good idea. I think the way we've tried to do it is just to show, we didn't want a forensic accountant actually looking at numbers, which is not the sort of thing you think one of these are, or people in logistics, which in ours is really trying to, I suppose, get the children to sort of quiz them about the subjects they did, the routes they took, the job, sometimes with images of what they do and who they work with or where they travel to. They work in a team, they work in offices, they work outdoors. So sometimes it's trying to bring those sort of things to life. Is it like a researcher? Well, what do you think of it? Well, they've probably got all the books, but beyond that, it's quite a hard. I'm not sure many people have put down I want to be a researcher, which is maybe a university prof, because they might know that. But so it is important to try and help them understand. And I go back to my earlier point. This is all just about broadening horizons. It's not really about encouraging kids to choose careers at a young age. It's showing them the world that schools would do if they're talking about culture or food or religion. It's part of their bringing up, and one of those elements is about the world of work, and in all its elements, as much as it would be about religion and faith, food.
It's every bit of developmental topic as any other. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Every more. And it's interesting because we're back to the likes and interests again. And this is what we do with adults. When we meet adults in a guidance setting, we ask them, what are your hobbies? What are your likes? What are your interests? Your strengths, your values? And it's bringing it back to the children and sometimes explaining to them how the fact that you're good at maths can open up so many different careers. And there's a lot of adults that don't know that. So I think it's breaking. I think sometimes we overcomplicate it because it's children, but we don't need to. It's about bringing it back to that. If you're good at this, would you ever think about doing that? It was funny. One of the questions that we asked in the conversations that we had in the classroom were, is there anybody at home working? And it's amazing how many children didn't actually know what their parents did. One little boy said, "Oh, my mum shouts at her laptop." So she does a lot of Zoom meetings. But it's it's just interesting how children and we forget, and sometimes we underestimate how much kids are taking in and how much they understand, and we maybe oversimplify or decide not to discuss things with them that they're well able.
Yeah.
And
that's a really valid point. That
Can I just come in as well? I want to give a shout out to Ross Banner here, who's in the audience. He has done some great work, and actually he was one of the few people that sponsored a session as part of DMH webinars, and I really respect Ross for that. But he has done some brilliant work around e-charts and images that can be used in schools. So take a look at his link that's there. And it's great to see other people sharing, you know, some of the links also. I'd love to hear from our overseas colleagues as to what sort of activities are going on in their country when it comes to career-related learning. We know that in Iceland and Sweden, Nick has mentioned, and New Zealand and Australia, but you know, do use this as an opportunity to just share any thoughts, any ideas. One of the questions earlier on was, well, what if children don't like drawing? Nick, how do you overcome that? Do they have to draw, or have you got another alternative if I'm a little protester at school thinking, I'm not drawing, I don't want to, I don't like it?
Well, there's a question. One of I did recently one of our team building exercises, well, it was designed to team build anyway, where we got all our team to do pictures of what they wanted to be when they were 7. And it was very interesting and hilariously funny, and some brilliant drawings. And there was my scribble, which would look like it had been done by a 2-year-old, not a 5-year-old. I think I win the prize for like the worst drawing. I was drawing a picture of a farmer and a sheep, but the sheep would look like a cow. So I can sort of maybe relate to actually a child not being able to draw very well. I think ours, you know, yes, all right, we have picked out some of the more interesting drawings, and maybe that's slightly unfair, but I think for us, it's what people often wrote. You know, they had the sort of scribble something, wrote something down, and that was equally important for a nice picture. The pictures are emotional and they're nice. You'll see in the back of the Northern Ireland report, we've also put some of the words of children have written down about why they want to do things and who's influenced them. So we've got that as well. So I think, you know, some need a bit of help with that as well, but sometimes the teacher helps them and, you know, they write something. So I don't, you know, this is not a competition on drawing. No, it's a nor is it a competition, nor are we judging people. We did this to try and understand kids' horizons and how affected they were by where they live and who they see, and how, you know, does where you live, in terms of if you live in a very disadvantaged part of the country, does it have a big impact on you, on your aspirations? And I may get Deirdre to say a bit about Coleraine. And we think it does, and we want to motivate people to volunteer to go to primary schools. For a long time, people said, we don't need to bother with primary schools. You start at 16, you know, it's irrelevant what happens in primary schools. So that was our motivation for doing this. In the older kids, we've actually done we've done a lot in the older age as well. We've done a series of online, mainly online stuff for the older things. And occasionally primary, but for most it's just easier to give them a piece of paper and a pen, because they can do that quite easily. They haven't all got the online stuff that secondary have.
If I can just draw on my first-hand experience, you know, I'm passionate about the town where I grew up. I lived on a housing estate, which had a reputation, probably not the best reputation. You might call it socially deprived, although I had a fabulous, lovely childhood, thanks to my wonderful parents and my siblings. But when we went to Ballysally, Nick's model has a sort of guess my line. So for our colleagues overseas, if you're not familiar with this, is basically you have five, maybe 6 people, and they come in and they're plain dressed, and the children get to ask them questions and they can answer yes or no. And then the children actually guess what they think that person does. Now, the point that Nick's making about how powerful this can be, not least the drawing, but let's put the drawing to one side. But for those young children in Ballysally, when we had, for example, Northern Ireland's top chef, a woman who actually grew up not far from where I lived, and indeed where they lived, when they guessed what she was, they asked her, are you a social worker? Are you probation? are you a policewoman? So for some of those children, in terms of what they could just see was, if you like, a narrow range of jobs where their parents, you know, were getting this extra support. And in some cases, you know, they didn't necessarily think that that was a good thing. I can't remember, Nick, what they thought I was at the time, but not dwell on that. But one of the most
I can't remember, and I'm not going to make
good, I'm glad.
everybody
I'm not going to
do another
share.
thing.
But I think one of the most important things is that those children being able to connect the relevance of learning English or maths. So for example, there was a pizza maker, and one of the projects I was involved in, they had a competition, and they basically said to the children, whoever can design the best pizza, it will actually go on sale in the shop. And actually you had to use your maths to work out, you know, how much cheese you might need. Think about how many tins of whatever you might need, etc. So what I love about career-related learning in primary, and Nick and I often have this conversation, he says to me, it's not about career. Whereas I say, yeah, we both agree it's about learning, and it's about making sense of how English or maths or whatever might be quite useful. And I think what our job is to try and get as early as possible to talk to children and their parents and teachers about making those links so that the children, and particularly those areas like Ballysally, that they have fantastic aspirations, and we do not want them to get to primary school and that gets knocked out of them. And a practical tip here for colleagues on this webinar is, in England, we have a system whereby primary schools have to report results from assessment tests. They're called SAT, standard assessment tests. When the child moves to post-primary, they go with the child. They get sent in advance. Nobody ever sends the schools, the secondary schools, in advance what these children's aspirations are. Maybe the skills that the children think that they've got already. And we did, with Nick's sponsorship and support, we did that in Derby, and it was a simple paper clip that went with the English and maths, which said, here is Nick, here's his aspirations, and here is how he's rated himself in terms of the skills that he's got. Now, I think we can do a lot more, and we can use AI, I think, as well going forward, but that's another story. So there's lots of practical things that we can point you in the direction of, the lesson plans, the badges, and I think we got to stay focused on, because I'm so passionate about Coleraine and this subject. I want to get back to the questions, because Tanya asked how children, when they grow older, and how they actually enter the labour market. Nick, you mentioned about your research that shows that sometimes the career ideas they had in primary stick with them when they get to 15 plus or more. Do you want to say a little bit more about that? When they grow older, what are you seeing? Because you have Inspiring the Future, which is a platform for secondary schools, post-primary, and you have a platform called Primary Futures for
yeah. Let me just see if I can share the slide. That give me.
It's great. And folks, we're about 10 minutes or so, maybe less than 10 minutes. I'll wrap up. I have a few little short slides I want to tell you about our next webinar, and I want to point you in the direction of some resources.
Yeah, you can see the slides. Yeah, that was a thing. We've done lots of reports on primary over the years. I won't go on to this. Particularly the main one is ours is this starting up. So there's a lot of research on the starting up one. This was the graph I was looking for. So this was where we took this is UK only, but we took the data for 7-year-olds, the data for 7 to 11-year-olds, 17 to 18-year-olds, and then we took labour market demands. So labour market demands are in grey, younger children in light orange and dark, in older children in dark orange. And you'll see C6, which is, not surprisingly, culture, media and sports arts, footballers, you know, starting very high, but coming down, but the pattern is still there. So I think for us, when we did some clever people did some sort of scientific analysis on statistic ability, probability, it was showing that the patterns have got quite a bit in common. You know, they're not exactly the same, but certainly C6, C11, C18, and where you've got very little interest, you know, it's very hard to generate that interest at a younger age. Because kids switch off, you know, so if you're not interested in science at 14, you're very unlikely to be interested in science at 16. I think we all know that. So it is about, for us, I know I said it a few times, it's about not ruling out possibilities because you're constrained by what you see, and you know, you don't see the world as, you know, in a wider context as it exists, because it's very hard to understand. You know, as we all know, it's very hard to understand. Even now, the changing of jobs for adults is bewildering. So as I said earlier, for children, it must be even more bewildering.
Deirdre, you're on mute.
Sorry, I wonder if I'll ever get through a meeting without someone having to say that to me. No, Jackie Hutchinson's saying here, she's sort of working on the idea of a careers passport. Again,
I love the idea.
Great to sort of, let's think about how that can become more of a reality. And I want to give a shout out to Fanine Bradley, who's not able to join us today. Excuse me. Fanine is from Northern Ireland, and Fanine has actually developed some skills cards for use in primary schools. She's at a hospital appointment today, but I did want to give a shout out because I think these webinars are about, can we support one another on this subject, share resources, think about research, and not reinvent the wheel, basically. I'm going to just stop for a second because I have to cough. So I'm going to let Aisling or Nick fill that space for just a minute or two.
Any other burning? Oh, go on, sorry.
Sorry, no, just see, Catherine made a point there, Catherine Jennings, about job titles can be really confusing for everyone, children and adults alike. And perhaps we should all try and create a 5-word phrase that describes what we do. I think that's brilliant because I think most of us would struggle to do that. And it would certainly put it up to us for both adults and children alike. I find even now when people ask me about my research, you know, you're supposed to be able to say it in a couple of sentences. And I find myself absolutely rambling. And I suppose that's difficult when you're so familiar with everything.
Absolutely. Yeah. And on that note, Tiffany from Devon in England here is saying that the language is so important. I think that's why you're a great double act, and with me in the middle, really, because, you know, when we think about teaching and learning and the importance of learning and making things relevant, that's Nick's starting point. Aisling, you know, you're training careers advisors, you're studying this aspect. And I think Tiffany's point is so important that we have to think about career can be scary for adults. So, you know, and teachers can put up barriers to doing career-related learning because they think the careers advisor is going to come in and sort of tell the children what to do. And there's been a few media headlines in the past which have misrepresented that. So Tiffany, thanks for sharing.
And Tiffany, just on that point, one of the things that was suggested to me to do and has been one of the best things I've done as part of this study was I developed what they call a CRAG, a Children's Research Advisory Group. And basically my key advisors now are 4 children. So 2 boys and 2 girls from each of the different year groups, and they review everything before I use it, and they listen to my presentations and my language, and it has been brilliant. Their feedback has been phenomenal, and it's really made a big difference to the tools that I've used in this research.
Thanks for that, Aisling, that's great. I want to also, we have a Professor Fusen, I call her AKKOK because it's very cool, Fusen, but Professor Akuk from Turkey. And actually, she is a leading expert around working with special educational needs young people, but also parents from across Turkey. And Fusen, any links to your work would be wonderful to share indeed with others. And I know you can be found on our website. But culturally relevant career-related learning is very important as well. You know, Western perspectives, Eastern perspectives, everything is changing in our world. So I do think that there is something there. If you have a look at what Fusen had contributed earlier around that importance of kind of working effectively with parents. Fusen, I'm not sure if I can turn you on, as it were, around activating your mic. I will try and see if I can do that. But if not, Fusen, just elaborate maybe a little bit more in the chat.
I'm going to just, I'll do it there, Deirdre, so she can, because then you can.
Yeah, brilliant. Are you there, Fusen? Can you talk to us?
Yes, warm greetings, everyone. It has been a very, very inspiring and stimulating webinar and all these thoughts. And I strongly believe that, yes, we have cultural differences, but some things are universal. And, you know, and children all around the world have similar aspirations and similar goals. It is geographically and culturally bounded, but also very universal, depending on so many factors. I mentioned in the chat about parental involvement programs that I have carried on. And as part of that program, I have invited parents of that specific group, specific classroom, to their classes to talk about very briefly about their professions, or to show some of the products of their profession or the work they do. If they are tailors, you know, they bring in some fabrics and they show what kind of fabrics they are and what they do with those fabrics, and you know, and they ask the children what they could do with those fabrics, etc. You know, and so the parents talk about their work, their job, their, you know, career, and then like one of the parents at that time had an ice cream parlor, so took the children to the ice cream parlor and talked about the food and the uses of ice cream and how they make ice cream and what other things they could do, you know, in relation to having ice cream, eating ice cream, and making ice cream, these sort of things. And I think at the primary level, this was a primary school parent involvement program, they could contribute to the children's career-related learning or exploration of their inspirations and goals. We could elaborate, but I'm aware of the time limitations, but thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Fusen. And look, I think as we kind of bring this session to a close, I can summarize really by saying there's no shortage of resources. I think we can learn from one another. I think if you look at Nick's research, and I've had the privilege of working not just with Nick, we have an absent friend today, Dr. Chris Percy, who was the lead author on the Northern Ireland report. Again, you know, there's a community of us who are researching and we're active. So perhaps we can use today to sort of support one another. I will formally thank our contributors, but I just want to share 3 slides with you before we wrap up, if I may. So if you've come to one of our webinars before, you'll see that I actually love this image. I'm a bit obsessed by it. Oh, not this one, Nick, that's yours. I'm going to stop sharing, much as I love yours. But can I just start again and see if I can just share this image? There we go. From my current slide, very quickly. I don't know why, Nick. It keeps showing up your slide. So I'm going to.
I have no idea.
It's very odd, isn't it? Right, 3rd time lucky. And if it doesn't work this time, well, I shall just send you the slides and I'll talk this through. Can you see my slides now?
No.
Can you see them?
If you go from current slide, Deirdre, will that work?
Yes, that's what I've done before, and it somehow goes to.
Back
It's back to me again.
I'll just yeah. What have you done? You've hijacked my
What have I done? Yeah.
No, it's
Yeah.
just sometimes technology works in mysterious ways.
Yeah.
So, listening ears, folks, rather than me sharing my 4 slides I had beautifully crafted. So slide number 1 is just in summary that, look, you know, there are barriers sometimes to getting into schools, and we do have to find ways to overcome. If you imagine a wall, we've got to climb over the wall and get in there, or we've got to tunnel in underneath. Or actually, we've got to maybe break down some of those walls to get in. And I think today's session might have given you a few ideas as to how you can do that. I think secondly, what I want to just share with you is that those of you who are familiar with my work and the activities around webinars, we have got a real strong interest in artificial intelligence. And we have something which we have developed, which is not for primary schools. It's work in post-primary schools. But I think there is another session at some point that someone could lead on around the use of AI in primary schools and what can it enable us to do that we couldn't do before. But if you'd like to see CC, the careers chatbot, then you'll just simply put in Career Chat UK and you can book a free demo. Much more exciting will be that the date of our next webinar. And our next webinar will actually be on the 14th of April. And it will be on the title of Developing Employability, Capital and University Students, a Practical Guide. So we're going to be joined by William E. Donald, who's an Associate Professor of Sustainable Careers and Human Resource Management at Southampton Business School. It's the University of Southampton here in the UK. But William is a prolific writer, and he comes also from an HR management background. He's co-editor-in-chief of Career Development International. He's been listed in the Shaw Trust Disability Power List Top 100, and he's one of the most, he describes himself as an influential disabled people, one of the most influential disabled people in the UK. And I would tend to agree with that. And he's going to be joined by Dr. Candy Ho from Canada. She's an international award-winning career development educator and scholar. And they're going to be talking about this topic of developing employability capital in university students with lots of real practical examples in 26 countries of how they've done that. And then finally, those of you who are here today may or may not be aware that I am a vice president of the International Association for Educational and Vocational Guidance. I'm one of 3, and it's a great honor to hold that role. And really, in the slide, you'll see there's become a member. You might want to become a member, and you can access the International Journal for Educational Vocational Guidance. If you're somebody who's in a professional association in your country, and that professional association is a member of the IAEVG, you get free access to everything, including the academic journal. So not a lot of people know that, and I just really wanted to bring that to your attention. So I'm left really with just 1 minute to go, and to thank Nick. A round of applause for Nick, perhaps some virtual, and also for Aisling. What a fantastic team. And most importantly, I want to thank all of you. If you have a look in the chat, you'll see that there's lots of really positive messages. So keep in touch. We are now part of a little community of interest in this big topic. Aisling will have provided her contact details. Nick has provided his, and also you'll have mine. Look forward to seeing you again, and most importantly, look after yourselves. These are difficult times, and I should maybe finish by just saying that in the UK, we had a chief executive called Steve Stewart, who was a friend and indeed a wonderful colleague who's just passed, actually, very, very suddenly. And Steve was one of these people who would light up a room, really good fun, but full of integrity, full of wisdom, and loved careers and everything that it stood for, from primary right through to later on in life. So we'll end with this one's for Steve. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.